Hello and welcome to our third episode of the Get French Football News preview show. I'm your host, Eric Devin. Joining me this week are Nathan Staples and Adam White. Peter Bowler is traveling and will be back with us next week. Without European matches to recap this week, the format of the show will be slightly different. Each week, whether there's European action or not, we will focus our attention on 4 or 5 matches that we think are the most interesting for the upcoming weekend of football. Taking an in-depth look at how the team should line up, what potential ramifications the result could have, and also bravely offering up our predictions. Before we get started with that, however, the Coupe de la Ligue started this week, matching the 20 teams from Ligue 2 with each other, as well as Paris FC and Châteauroux from the 3rd Division, with Créteil set to join the second round. The matches generally exceeded expectation, being quite a bit more exciting than an average weekend of Ligue 2 action, with 5 of the matches going to penalties. Highlights included Clermont conceding a 90th minute equalizer to Amiens before responding with the winner in the 3rd minute of injury time for a 2-1 victory. Le Havre defeated Reims 5-2, and Paris FC got a little bit of revenge for relegation, defeating Red Star in a derby match on penalties. The next round is set for Tuesday, August 23rd at 18:30 Central European Time. Follow us on @GFFN Match Zone for all the goals from those matches. So thanks for joining me this evening, gents. Wanted to start then with Bordeaux versus Saint-Etienne. Both of these clubs have brought in some impressive players in the transfer window, including Jeremy Poulalon and Jeremy Menez at Bordeaux, while Brian Dabo has joined Saint-Etienne from Montpellier. Despite the excitement surrounding these three, none of them are actually likely to feature, though through a combination of suspension and injury. So Adam, I'd like to start with you. Bordeaux have lost quite a few important players, including the strikers Cheick Diabate to Turkey, and Enzo Crivelli's gone on loan. So a two-part question for you. One is, how do you think Bordeaux should set up formation-wise? And two, do they have enough goals in this team to have a successful season?
Yeah, it's interesting how they're going to set up, actually. I think they've got a lot of width. Given their signings over the summer, Jeremy Menez, Francois Camano, Adam Unas obviously already there. They've got a lot of width, and it'd be great to make use of it. I'm quite surprised that they let Enzo Crivelli go on loan. I thought he was developing as a player. Perhaps he needs game time. Perhaps he'll get more of that at Bastia. But given Diabate went, I would have thought they would have kept him as sort of at least a backup to Diego Rolon, and he got quite a lot of game time last season. So I would have imagined that it might have been similar this time. But perhaps with Gaëtan Laborde, had a great season at Clermont, coming back into the side, doesn't look like he's going to go on loan. Perhaps maybe he's seen as the sort of this backup striker, and they want Crivelli to get more action on loan. So I like them to go like 4-3-3. I think with Toulon and Placel in midfield, and then perhaps someone like Valentin Vada, who came in last season and looked good at times, perhaps a little bit raw still, but maybe see him play in a more advanced role because he's good on the ball, can pick a pass, and feed those channels, and maybe have Menez one side and Camano on the other with Rolon through the middle. Perhaps even Adam Unas could move inside, or even start ahead of Francois Camano on the other side, or maybe go 4-2-3-1 because Unas can play anywhere across that front line. So I think they could also make use of the width in fullback positions. Yusuf Salabi was brilliant for Nantes last season coming forward from right back. So I'd like to see them attack. I think they've definitely got the goals. I think with those forward players, those front four, Menez, Unas, Camano, and Rolon, with Toulon and Placel feeding them the bullets, I think they'll score goals, and I'd like to see them use that width and attack teams.
Nathan, I'll come on to you. So what are your feelings about Bordeaux's defense? And we had Nicolas Palois and Pablo playing there last season, but they've lost some veteran players, like Lamine Sané in particular. And there were, of course, the goalkeeper issues. Paul Bernardoni did not look up to snuff after his arrival from Troyes. Cedric Carrasso is just about fit, but I think there's an interesting decision to be made here for Bordeaux, for Jocelyn Gourvenec, whether to persist with Carrasso, who's 35 later this year, or to move to Jérôme Prieur. What are your thoughts on the defense and goalkeeping situation at Bordeaux?
I'll go on to the goalkeepers first. You mentioned, first of all, let's exclude Paul Bernardoni. Even though he's got that number 1 shirt, I don't think he's proved at any stage last season in those final couple of games when Carrasso was injured that he deserves a chance in goal permanently. And then it's a tough choice. You mentioned Cedric Carrasso's 35, but for a goalkeeper, if you're of a very good quality or even a good quality, that's not too old. You can go into your late 30s as a goalkeeper, and I still think Cedric Carrasso has something to offer. He made a couple of little mistakes before he got injured, and he's not always perfect. But do you risk throwing someone like Jerome Pryor in when you're not fully settled in defence? And that's why we move on to those. Nicolas Poirier, you mentioned, had a good season last season. I thought he was impressive, except from the frankly bizarre moment against Nice, where not against Rennes, apologies, where he went a bit crazy, might be the best way to put it, and threw himself around the place and got a long suspension. But him and Pablo were relatively decent. I thought Pablo was good at points last season when he got his chance, and I think they will probably be the starting partnership. Adam's already mentioned Youssouf Sabaly was very, very good at Nantes last season. Whether he's good enough defensively, I don't think. That's the bit I need to be convinced on from him, because he is very good going forward. There's no doubt about that. I just want to see a little bit more from him this season. This is this kind of team to do it in as well, and it's a difficult choice at left back. They've started Diego Contento quite often, but he's not great tracking back either, which isn't ideal. But who else you put in his stead is the difficulty. So that's my worry for Bordeaux, especially in this game against Saint-Etienne, where they have very good wide players in Hamouma and Tenan who've shown how good they are. Are their fullbacks good enough? That's probably going to be their biggest test on the evening.
All right, so speaking of Saint-Etienne, we can come on to them now. We have a team that has been hit with injuries and suspensions. Nolan Roux, Fabien Lemoine are both suspended. Brian Dabo's injured. Adam, do you think that this necessitates perhaps a change in tactical approach, or should they persist with that 4-3-3, starting, say, Clement, Pajot, and Selness?
Yeah, I think that second option is more likely. I think given Gautier's sort of track record, he's a very pragmatic coach, and he's been trying 4-4-2 actually in some pre-season friendlies with Roux and Beric up front together. And he said that that's a formation that he would like to play, but isn't seeing like it being effective as yet. So at some point in the season, they may move on to a 4-4-2, which would be quite exciting with Hamouma and Tenan wide and just two midfielders, a little bit more open than what Ligue is known for. But I think for this game, I think he said it for the European games as well, he'd rather stick with a more pragmatic, more defensive 4-3-3 that his players are used to. So I think it's going to be that Cornier, Pajot, Selners, rather uninspiring central midfield. But I'd like to see him attack. It's possible he could go 4-4-2.
Nathan, what are your thoughts on Saint-Etienne? I mean, this is a team that have done decently well in their two competitive matches that we've seen them in, defeating AEK Athens over two legs. They have one could even argue an easier draw in this next round against Beitar Jerusalem. Do you feel that Christophe Galtier is ready to make a statement of intent with this match? I mean, Bordeaux are a presumptive European rival. Is he gonna hold a little bit back for next Thursday's match?
You could say he will be holding a little bit back for that match on Thursday, but at the same time, Christophe Galtier is the kind of manager to hold something back full stop because of his defensive sensibilities. Adams mentioned that midfield three that he'll probably play, which sounds incredibly dull and lifeless, which is nice to know from Saint-Etienne. That's the usual, which is why Brian Dabo is a relatively big miss with his injury, because his ability to sort of go as a box-to-box will really be missed. Do they need to go through the throat against Bordeaux? If this is a different Bordeaux than we saw from last season, then they might find this a bit trickier than they might be expecting. If this is the Bordeaux we saw at times last season, where they would self-implode, Saint-Etienne will be walking into exactly the kind of game they'll be wanting. But I'm a little worried. We've mentioned already about their left-back position, and it looks like it depends on, they might start Shekham Benway there, or it might be similar to where they started in the Europa League. And if that's the case, with Adam's already mentioned the ability that they have in wide positions at Bordeaux. Even without Menes, they've still got Unas, who's terrific. Camano can play there. Even Diego Roland, they might even start out wide if they decide to go with someone else as the centre forward. So that would be my main worry for Saint-Etienne. But they're going to start defensively regardless. I don't think Galtier will have Thursday in mind with that idea. He will just simply set up the way he thinks Saint-Etienne win, which is by being solid.
All All right. So on that, Nathan, if you're feeling a certain way, what would you give us for a score prediction?
I fancy Bordeaux in this one. I've not been enormously impressed with Saint-Etienne during the Europa League qualifiers. They've been functional rather than successful, I would say. So I'm pumping for a sneaky 2-0 win for Bordeaux.
Okay. Adam, for yourself?
Yeah, I think I agree. At the beginning of last season, the Europa League definitely affected Saint-Etienne. I think they lost their opening game away at Toulouse, I think, as well. When obviously they haven't had a game this
season. 3-2,
so,
I think.
Was it 3-2? Wow,
I think so, yeah.
I remember Perrin header in that game, possibly. But they were affected by the Europa League, and they haven't had a game midweek, but they will have one later on. So I think Gavin will have that a little bit on his mind. As Nathan says, they do tend to always kind of hold something back, even when they haven't got a midweek game. So I think the midfield is going to be the key battle here. I think if Tourellon and Passil play, they could dominate the midfield in terms of possession. And I fancy Bordeaux to sneak it 1-0. I guess Saint-Etienne is still quite good, solid defensively. They're not going to concede many goals. Maybe Bordeaux nick a late goal and win it 1-0. That's my best efforts at the moment.
No, that I can definitely see where both of you are coming from. I will be a differing opinion though. I'll offer up a 1-1 draw. I feel that Bordeaux, have a bit of a spotty record going forward, and I think that the objections that you both rightly raised to the defensive qualities of the fullbacks, whether that's Contento, whether that's Sabali, I think do give a lot of chance for those wide players for Saint-Etienne to create something for the likes of Beric. So moving on then, the second match we'll address in today's show is Nantes' visit to Dijon. I mean, these are not two exactly fashionable teams, but there's, as we shall see, a bit of a good reason to talk about both of these two. This is a Nantes squad who've undergone some restructuring. Alejandro Bedoya has departed, as has Birama Touré, and lone players Sabali, who we mentioned, now he's on loan to Bordeaux, and Emir Lanjani, the Albanian left back, has gone back to Rennes. There's still a lot of intriguing pieces here. Midfielder Valentin Rongier is coming back from a long-term injury. He'd been really superb last year. Summer signings Lima and Diego Carlos, both of them who have been signed from Portugal, look to slot in immediately, left back and central defense respectively. So, Adam, I want to come to you first. Talk to me a little bit about how Girard might structure this team. He has a reputation for being very defensively sound, but in addition to the two Portuguese, he's also brought in a handful of creative players. Nikolai Thompson from the Danish League. He was the second leading assist maker in the Danish Superliga last year. Alexander Kakanishlic, who some people might remember from his days at Fulham, and as well as under-19 European Championship winner Amin Harit. So there's quite a bit of creative options there. What should we look for in this match on Saturday in terms of a system and in terms of potential starting 11?
I think it's interesting because Girard played Diamond at the end of his Lille career, which would suit perhaps the midfield forward of Guillaume, Gillet, Thompson, and Rongier. But in pre-season, he's been playing a lot of 4-1-4-1 with Kacaniklic wide, Thompson wide. Thompson wide. Maybe he's looking for that. You mentioned that Thompson was one of the top assisters in Denmark last season. Perhaps that's where they're looking to get the best out of Salah and Sigtorsson, perhaps give them a little bit more creativity, a little bit more opportunity to score. Because as we mentioned before, Nantes are a very low-scoring side in the last couple of years. So perhaps he's looking for that width, get balls into the box, which suits Sigtorsson. We described him as lumbering or like a lamppost before, but he is good in the air and he's got presence at least. So he's not going to be the striker to chase balls over the top or anything like that, but he will hold the ball up well and he will win headers and will be a presence in the area. So that 4-1 formation looks like it will persist, and they'll look to get balls into the box. Whether Sigtorsson starts this game is unlikely, but I would imagine Salah will start, and he's a similar sort of player. So perhaps don't have necessarily the resources to bring in a new striker. They've got two very similar forwards, so perhaps he's thought that that's the best way to get the best out of both Salah and Sigtorsson in the forward positions. I think that they'll be interesting now. I think that they'll probably be favourites for this game, and they'll look to attack down the flanks, and it could be a way to improve their attacking output, which would be nice for a start, and hopefully Girard will come up with the right formula.
Nathan, on Sigtorsson, I think Adam rightly mentioned there that Girard has more options than Emilio Mano Sala and Yassine Bamu. who do you think is Nant's best option at center forward?
Good question. um, they're all. Adam's already mentioned. They're all very similar. To be fair, they're all big, strong players. They aren't particularly fast. They aren't particularly mobile. Maybe Salah's the most mobile out of the three, but that's pushing it really. You're tossing a coin, in my opinion. I think the one probably with the most potential to be good is probably Sigthorsson. Maybe edges it. I think we've seen from Salah before when he was at Caen on loan that he can be successful in the right kind of team. And credit to Girard, the way he's built this team with Kacaniklic on one wing. We mentioned Thompson playing on the other wing and creating assists, putting balls into the box is probably the best way he's going to get the best out of someone like Sigthorsson, who would thrive off of those sort of services. But at the same time, in that Iceland team, he was the one who would flick that on to someone else. That's where maybe someone like Adrian Thomason comes in, where he may be just behind the striker. He was, I think, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he won the most headers in the entire tournament. Sigthorsson, he won like something like an average of 14 headers per game or something silly. So having him up front as a figure point is not a bad decision if you can get the players like the Kacanikliches, the Thomasons and the Thompsons around him. It might be the best option because he's probably the best to keep the ball at his feet than someone like Bamu or Salah.
I think you make a very strong point there, Nathan. One player who we haven't really talked about and hasn't really played much in Ligue 1 or at all is the youngster Amin Hari. He just, again, won the Under-19 European Championships. Again, looking at the championships and the way that the French team is regarded, obviously it was Kylian Mbappe and Jean-Kevin Augustin who were receiving all the press for their magnificent goal-scoring records. But we should mention that Ari, playing in a system that doesn't exactly privilege a creative player, was the tournament's leading assist getter with 3. He's proved his worth in that team throughout qualification. He had an additional handful of assists in qualification. And looking at him, for me, I think that, and again, obviously the likes of Thompson and Thomason are also impressive creative players, but for me, I wonder whether it wouldn't be interesting if Girard were to go for a 4-2-3-1. You have Rongier and Gillet, who both of whom are fine defensive players. Rongier offers a bit more going forward. Sitting behind a lineup of Thomason with Harit being played centrally. His kind of creative nous and vision, I think, could really open things up for not going forward. And I really do believe that he needs to be given some sort of a chance. He's earned. The former manager of Red Star has given him comparisons to Sofiane Boufal. Again, that's a long way away, given where Boufal is in his career and the fact that Harit's just turned 19. But the fact of the matter is, we saw Ousmane Dembele break out last year at Rennes. I'm not saying that Harit is at that level, but again, no one knew who Dembele was at this time last year. And looking through the teams in Ligue 1 who are bringing in younger players, I think that Harit at Nantes has a real chance to be a breakout star. He's going to be given probably not a very long leash given Girard's defensive proclivities, but should he get that chance to develop and grow, maybe not make a decent cup run, he gets some more playing time in that regard. I think we could really be looking at one of France's brightest new talents. I do want to come on now to Angers. And back to you, Adam. Their transfer business, I think they made a couple of impressive moves. Fouad Shafik and Abdelhamid from Valenciennes, some other players who have done pretty well in Ligue 2, somewhat similar to the transfer policy that Angers had enlisted last season in bringing in players from other Ligue 2 clubs who had impressed. They look to be setting up in a 4-2-3-1. They probably, of the promoted teams, look like the one that's best equipped to stay up. But how important is a win against a team like Nantes, who could also potentially be struggling?
I think it would be. I think the opening day of the season can be quite changeable, quite unpredictable. I think you remember last season. In fact, the same fixture came up the first day of this season, the Montpellier-Angers game, when Angers went to Montpellier and that 1-2-0 with Shaken Doyle on form, and that really set the ball rolling for their season ahead. I think it's quite close between the three promoted sides. I like what Metz have done. I think they've signed some good Ligue 1 experience. But Dijon and Nancy, both good sides, both coming up from Ligue 1. We've seen teams in the past recruit well from Ligue 1. Angers did it brilliant last season. Picked off the best players from the teams in Ligue 1 and survive in Ligue 1 almost entirely on that basis. But Dijon have added a couple of more experienced Ligue 1 players as well, with Marvin Martin come in, who is a talented guy, but whether his knees are ever going to be the same again is questionable. But a player I've always been a big fan of, he's a Ligue 1 veteran, is Florent Balmont, who at times with Lille last season, especially under Antonetti when he joined the club, was a real leader. He's always been a real leader, but he was even more so. He really sort of signified the way Antonetti wanted to play. And the fact that Lille let him go and he's gone to Dijon, I think he could be huge for them this season in that midfield role, given that they're not the most experienced of Ligue 1 sides. But he could really be crucial in their attempts to stay up. So I think if they can get something from this game, it's at home, I believe. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this is a huge opportunity for them to get the ball running with perhaps Nantes not necessarily into their stride yet, into going to sort of a more hostile atmosphere away from home. They're generally slightly better at home. Nantes, I can see even getting something from this game, and I think given those midfield, the midfield battle again would be really important, and Balmont could be crucial to that with him and Martin, if he's ever fit. They could have a good season in that area.
Nathan, I want to someone to you now, talking about, we often, I don't know if we deride, but we definitely will say that Ligue 2 is a more defensive league. Dijon weren't really fitting into that mold last year, though. They had likes of Samaritano, Malfitano, Tavares, quite a few players who have a creative presence and a goal-scoring record that's impressive. Do you think that looking at a side that's well known for being defensive and not, and a manager, even though it's different from last season, in René Girard replacing Michel de Zakarian, how important, again, do you think this is confidence-wise for Dijon to not only get a result, but to display some good attacking play against one of Ligue 1's most dogged defensive teams?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think in any league, if you're a promoted side, your first game of the season, I think, is a free swing where you should try and establish what you want to do for the rest of the season rather than hold out and pray for a result. Because this isn't the time to do it. This is the time to get your fans on your side. And Dijon, like you've mentioned, are a very attacking side. And Max mentioned on our previous show on Monday that they like playing entertaining football, but they might not be the best at the back, especially losing Julien, who's gone to Toulouse. He was on loan at the club last season. They'll probably look to go for it, I think, especially in that first half. Dunoy was solid last season up front for them, and like you've already mentioned, Amalfitano, Samaritano, Jeremy Bella, even though he had a injury hit season last season, he's a positive player for them as well. Again, my worries is that they'll go for it and they might get caught at the back. We've mentioned that they don't have too many. They've brought in the likes of Bukamutu from Angers to try and do something, but I don't think it's really enough. And if the note that we half expect to see with those creative players that we've already mentioned, I don't know if Dijon can keep them at bay, because that first 30 minutes will be the important bit. I think if Dijon can put enough pressure on Nantes through their attacking play, through their creativity, and grab a goal against a defence that can be a bit stubborn, that might knock Nantes a little bit, where they're a side that will rely on a bit of confidence to try and G themselves up to try and get a goal. But it's such a tentative balance for them, this game, and I don't know if they've got enough to do it.
All right, we'll come on to our predictions now. Adam?
Well, I think it's going to be close. I'm going to say 1-1 draw.
Okay. Nathan?
I'm going to give this a classic Nantes result from last season, which is 1-0 Nantes.
All right, I will go with a 2-2 draw.
Oh, look forward to that.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I think both these teams have made a point to improve the attacking phase of their game, and I think that if Dijon are at home, wanting to G the crowd up, I think that's an excellent point. That I think that both should come out of their shell to a fairly decent degree. So we move on now to Nice versus Rennes. This is a Sunday match. The battle of two new managers, Lucien Favre and Christian Gourcuff. So Nathan, I'll come on to you. I know you are a big supporter of Lucien Favre. He, during his time at Mönchengladbach, had used a aggressive pressing 4-4-2. Nathan, is that going to work in France? And moreover, does he have the personnel to do it?
Good question. I think he might adapt it a little bit for Ligue, mainly because of the players at his disposal, like you say there. Because I don't think he has enough to play a 4-4-2 because he doesn't have two good enough strikers to keep implementing that. I can imagine that he's going to probably move Alassane Player into that solo striker's role that Germain held last year. Other than that, if you look at the list of strikers, they've got Le Bien, maybe he's okay. Brian Constant, they're just, for some reason, still Alexis Bissetti's still there, but they don't have an unlimited amount of forwards to try and play that way. They're going to have to try and do it from a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1 and try and press from there and have players like, if they can get Willian Cyprien to do all the work, or the returning Valentin Esseric, or even Vincent Cosiello from that role that he played last season as a box-to-box. That kind of pressure from there will probably be the way he kind of plays. I can still imagine it will be a solid defensive outfit, and he's still going to try and get them to push forward and press the ball, and then play on the counter, which I think they can do successfully with the sort of players they've got. Players very quick. Cosiello's very good at changing possession from back to front as a player to bridge the gap between the lines, and I think that's going to be the way they're going to go about it. If he can bring one or two more in, he might be able to do the 4-4-2 in the future. There's just not the players to play two up front in this Nice team.
Adam, what about yourself? I think that Nice have really pushed themselves this preseason to play challenging friendlies. They've played Napoli and Sporting Club de Portugal in their two most recent friendlies. They're trying to ramp up for a Europa League campaign. How do you think this team is going to adapt? They've lost a lot of really important players in Pied, Atem Ben Arfa, Valère Germain. How do you see this team evolving this season in terms of not only their tactics but their general philosophy?
I think it's going to be interesting to see how they do adapt, because that, when you mention those names that they've lost in terms of Ben Arfa, Germain, even Napolis Mende as well, they've lost the heart of the attacking part of that team, and they are going to have to adapt. They can't continue to play the same way. I mean, they've lost that X factor. I think Ben Arfa we know how brilliant he was, but it's very difficult to understate how important he was for Nice's success last season, playing up front or playing in a hole in a head of a diamond. He ran them in terms of an attacking outfit, and he's almost irreplaceable for a club like Nice. So it's going to be extremely interesting to see how they adapt, and Favre is the right man to do it. He was fantastic at Gladbach. I think he took over and they were close to the relegation zone, and he got them out, and he progressed that side, bringing in players like Michael Royce and Patrick Herman, and they played a much different style, and they're going to have to emulate that at Nice. They're going to have to play much more, instead of relying a little bit on Ben Arfa in forward areas, although obviously Germain was brilliant last season too. They're going to have to play that more, obviously adapt it, but that more pressing style. They're going to rely on that midfield, which players like Walter, Esseric, Cosiello, Jean-Michel Seri, they're better on the ball. They're going to keep the ball a little bit more, perhaps, but I have to play a little bit more defensively. But I think if they are going to adapt without Ben Arfa and Germain, then Favre is the right man to do it. We mentioned on a previous show that, I think it was Nathan mentioned, that this is the coup in terms of the summer in terms of managerial appointments, and he's their real ace this season. Like, maybe the X factor can come from Favre rather than Ben Arfa in the coming weeks.
Nathan, I'll come on to you talking about Rennes now. One team that is almost certain to play a 4-4-2 is Rennes under Christian Gourcuff. They've been playing that extensively in their preseasons. But for me, they've been using Wesley Said and Kermit Erasmus as the strike partnership. Two questions. Do Rennes have the players in general to make this succeed? I'm thinking particularly in terms of width in the midfield. But secondly, does Paul-Georges Ntap have a role in that formation?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I think we've seen Paul-Georges Ntap in that wide role mainly in that 4-3-3 though, really, which was really successful with Dembele and Grosicki last season. I think he can still play on the wing. I think he's still good enough, but the question then becomes: is he a defensive liability in that kind of formation where you've already mentioned? Have they got the right kind of midfielders for that? I'm not 100% certain. I mean, they played a lot of Benjamin Andre. I'm looking at the list now, and there's players like Chanton, which is better for that kind of formation. At least those two. I don't know if that's quite enough of a creative pairing from that middle to bridge the gap between the midfield and the attack. It's going to be tough, isn't it? I think if he persists with that 4-4-2, he might need another player in that midfield area that's a bit more creative. And like you mentioned, and Tep's arguably their best player still. I don't think there's any question about that he's still their most talented footballer. And if you can keep him fit, he'd be a real X factor for them again this season. But can you play him outside on the left wing or the right wing with two up front and allow him to not shield what isn't the best fullbacks in Ligue? I don't know. I'm not so sure of it. But Christian Gorkov's got a lot more experience as a manager than me. I'm sure he's worked this out. I'm still questioning the strike partnership as well. Are they good enough at this level? This is a real wait and see at the moment for me for their squad. I still think they need some business to be done.
Adam, given Intep's injury histories, do you think that Gorkov is deploying this formation out of a means of sticking to his principles, or is there also some consideration about moving past Intep, given his track record in the past few years? And with that also, do you see him as adapting this team to be a little bit younger? We're seeing the likes of Danze finally probably definitively losing his place to Morera, Armand being dropped. It's a younger team overall.
Yeah, absolutely it is. It's interesting that you say that. I mean, I'm not sure that's the right way to go necessarily. I've always thought that although it's great to bring for young players and focus on youth to some extent, that there needs to be a blend. And I like Sylvain Armand. I think he's something that can still offer a lot to that defence. You think about Hilton, the Victorino Hilton at Montpellier, or even older, and he's still a great player, still had a good season last season. So I'd like to not necessarily see players left out based on the fact that they're perhaps only 1 or 2 seasons left in them. I think they've still got, both him and Donze, who's only 30, have still got quite a lot to offer. I think in terms of the formation with Intep, perhaps it's something that if they were to play last season that 4-3-3 they were lucky with Dembele coming through, but perhaps without Intep there would be a big hole in that team. As it stands, Intep can fit into this formation, but it's not lost without him. So given that it's not going down as a possibility that he moves soon, given he was linked strongly with Liverpool over the last season or so, they can play this 4-4-2 with Intep or without him. I'd like to see him, perhaps if they went straight 4-4-2 and played two right up front, that perhaps they could play Intep as one of the forwards. It also depends a lot on Gorkov, on the son, Gorkov Jr. He's 30 now, but I've always been a big fan of his at club level. Never had the best time for the national team, but I think he's equally important to Intep. If he could stay fit and they could have both those players in this team, they could be really interesting, and it may even morph into a 4-2-3-1 if Gorkov's a mid, and then you've got sort of Intep one side and Grosicki, who I've always been a big fan of, on the other. But as Nathan mentioned, that the fullbacks aren't necessarily the most capable defensively, and they could be left open, which is obviously a worry. But the main thing for Rennes is whether with or without Georges Intep, they need to be an effective team, and in that 4-4-2, that could be the main thing that keeps them in that top half of the table, assuming Intep doesn't play every game. So it'd be interesting to see how that develops with those three attacking midfielders.
All right, we'll get some score predictions now here, Nathan.
This is a tough one. These two teams will be really interesting to watch this season and how they evolve. I'm going 1-1.
Okay, Adam?
I agree with Nathan that there'll be a draw, but I think the lack of goals in both teams, I think is going to be a 0-0, unfortunately.
Taking my prediction. Okay, I'm not going to say another 2-2 draw. I'll go with a 1-0 win for Nice. Koziello with the assist to Playa. I think that Koziello has been played a lot more in forward roles in preseason. I think that he looks to be used in a much more attacking sense in the coming months. So
if that happens, that doesn't get you extra points just because you mentioned it.
That's okay. That's okay. I just want to make a note that Koziello, I think, looks to be a real creative fulcrum for this team, and that he should be looked forward to. So our last match, two embattled clubs to say the least. We have to say a word or two on Marseille. This is a huge match as they host Toulouse at the Velodrome. Marseille have looked really poor in friendlies, the back line especially. But I guess the question then is, coming to you, Nathan, did Toulouse match up well enough in terms of being able to get anything done against that even iffy Marseille back line?
I'm not so sure. They've brought in Ola Toivonen over the summer, and I can't think of many other forwards that wouldn't really test this Marseille backline like other forwards would do. He's not going to go in behind. He's going to stand in front of them, and if you're struggling, as Marseille have been, that's exactly the kind of thing you want, someone standing in front of you and not giving you issues in behind, because we saw Marseille last season have real problems with quick counters against many teams. I can remember the game, I want to say it was against Nice, it might have been Rennes, where they scored about 3 in the first half, was it? I think it was Nice. It was definitely one in Rennes.
The same thing, so
yeah, it was probably both. It was probably both. So they really struggled with like fast, quick counters. Can Toulouse do that? I'm not 100% certain. They've got Martin Braithwaite, who does like to get in behind. Is he enough of an X factor to really push Toulouse to a victory in this one? I don't know. This is going to be a really, really... I don't know if interesting is the right word. Is there a word for dull interesting? I'm not... There's intrigue, but not the right kind of this one. I think Toulouse might cause a couple of problems if Braithwaite can get in behind. If they can't get him involved enough and get him firing on motors, which he did points last season, but at other points he was not so good. Then maybe Toulouse have enough for this game, because although they've brought in a couple of interesting loan players in the last couple of weeks, Marseille, I'm still not convinced again of where they can be.
All right, Adam, I'll come on to you. So, for me, this club has had an interesting offseason. They brought in the likes of Otson, Edouard, and Toivonen, but I think that Nathan makes a good point about the pace. But for me, another issue would be a lack of links between what's a decent defensive midfield, the likes of Jan Bodeguer and Alexis Blin. But how do you see Toulouse overcoming their potential issues in terms of linking those sound defensive central midfielders with these bigger strikers? Edouard is also similarly a target man type player, a bigger physical striker.
Yeah, it is interesting. I thought that possibly without Ben Yedder, who did that really well at times. I think although he ended up sort of playing up front on his own, he'd have Braithwaite one side and perhaps Regatan on the other. He still managed to link the play really nicely. Given the form of Oscar Trejo towards the end of the season, when Dupraz came in, he dropped him and wasn't his biggest fan. And to be honest, he'd been ineffective for quite not bad, just not really affecting the game as much as perhaps would be expected of him. I would have thought that their main priority in the transfer window would have been an attacking midfielder. Dupraz seems pretty sort of dead set on a at least last season on a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. So that linking player is really crucial. Perhaps Trey is going to get a chance, because as far as I can see, he's the only player in that team that is going to give them that. Unless perhaps Braithwaite drops off and he just assumes the Ben Yedder role a little bit. Toivonen goes up front. They go 4-2-3-1, but. It's definitely their biggest issue. I worry for Toulouse. I like them a lot, and I like Dupraz. But if you look on paper, they look like one of the weaker sides in the division, especially with Akpo going, who I've always been quite a big fan of. I think he's a good midfielder. Who will probably leave, given he's out of favour with Pascal Dupraz. whether they've got enough strength in central areas. Could Jesse P perhaps pick a pass, play a little bit further forward? I don't know. I don't think he's that sort of player. Himblin, Dumbia, Somalia, Silla, Trejo, they're not the most, a bit like Zanetti, not the most dynamic of midfield groups. So that's definitely their issue, and perhaps that's if they can sign someone before the end of the transfer window, even on loan, that's really what they need to do.
Yeah, so I'll come on to you. Let's talk to me a little bit about the pressure that's going to be on Marseille for this match. I mean, again, Mo on the show on Monday preached patience, but they're at the Velodrome. They're at a team that they really, really should be beating. What should Marseille expect? What should they be feeling?
Pressure. What pressure? I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? The fans are in such a precarious position because there will be a lot of them that still expect Marseille to be Marseille, which is the biggest club in French football. Let's even though the money of PSG, Marseille fans still see their club as the big team. Are they tempered from the experiences of last season and the summer? I don't know, because clearly there was a lot of unrest last season with the abysmal home record they had last season. It was truly horrific at times. They couldn't buy a win. It seemed like everything was going against them. Can the players handle that kind of pressure? They've lost a couple that could in Mandanda, and Kulu could as well. Batshuayi wasn't too bad under it either. They've made some good moves. I think making Lassana Diarra captain, as long as he stays, is a solid move. They've brought back Tovan officially today, although he's already played a friendly, which was one of the strangest bits of news. And I think Bafétimbi Gomi, especially at this level, is a very, very good signing and will get them goals. There's no doubt about that. I just still worry about their defence. Rekic is a liability. Are they even going to play Doria? I don't know. Rolando's not the best of centre-backs. Thomas Hubocan might play right-back even. He's not the greatest of centre-backs, and he's not the greatest of right-backs. So I don't know what they're going to do with him either. And then you add that Johan Pele's going to play in goal, which is outstanding at his age to be a sub-goalkeeper for so long and then get his chance in the weirdest of circumstances. I again, much like Adam mentions, this Toulouse team is very strange on paper. This Marseille team on paper is very, very unusual and very weirdly top heavy, because the talent up front is there and the talent in midfield even is there in if you can keep Abu Diaby fit for 5 seconds, or if Remy Cabella can find the kind of form we've seen him have in the past. They're under immense pressure to win this game, and I'm not 100% sold that they can win it. Not with the team that they're going to be putting out on the weekend.
Adam, come on. You just to conclude then. Lassana Diarra has been named today the captain of Marseille for the upcoming season. Do you think with his return and the signs of likes of Gomis, Tovan, that there's enough in Marseille to not only beat Toulouse this weekend, but to, if these players get a chance to gel, can they actually maybe, exceed a mid-table finish?
I think they'll certainly be hoping so. I think on paper it does look that way. That given the talent, if you think about the front six of if everybody's fit, which is going to be unlikely given it's Abu Diaby in the team, but you've got Diarra, Diaby, Cabella, Gomis, and Kudu. If that move does fall through, and Tuvan, that's a really good front six. But obviously the reality situation aren't as clear or as simple as that. So I actually, this morning I was sort of looking at the Ligue table and trying to predict a finishing table of the 20, and one team I couldn't really place anywhere would be Marseille. They could finish anywhere between 4th and 16th. It's very difficult to say where they're gonna end up. They have the talent to finish in the top 6, top 8, even higher perhaps. But they had the talent last season and it didn't work. So perhaps Frank Pressey can provide some stability, and they can finish a little bit higher and perhaps give their fans something to shout about. Perhaps is job one for them this season to stabilise and to start playing better football, win some games, not really think about where they're going, just take every game as it comes, and they've got no European football to worry about. So just do what they can and see where it takes them. Perhaps after Christmas they can start thinking about where they are and where they can push on to. But Gomes is going to score goals. Thuram up and down, but he's a talented player. So I think you have to say based on that they'd finish top half. But where in the top half, it's very difficult to tell.
All right. So with that, Adam, your prediction for Sunday's Grand Choc, as they say?
Indeed. I think I'd have to make Marseille favourites, even though their disgraceful home record last season. Toulouse look like a very, as Nathan mentioned, and we were discussing, they look very, very odd and weak on paper. And I think they could be in trouble this season. It's just how Depraz gets the best out of that side. So I think Marseille nick it 1-0.
Okay, Nathan?
I'm going to go for the exact opposite, and this be sort of a freak result, because I can see Toulouse struggling, and I can see Marseille not in relegation play. They're going to be very similar to last season, I think. I think they're going to be in the bottom half. There's too many teams that are much more stable and are going to cause them too many problems, but I can just see that there's one chance in this game, and even though he misses 3 or 4 a game, I think Martin Braithwaite takes it, and it's a 1-0 win.
I'll go for a 2-0 win for the home side. Gomes, who I've always had a soft spot for dating to his Lyon days. He's always got a smile on his face, even when he's offside. So we'll go with a 2-0 win for the hosts. So that does it for this week. We ran a little bit longer than we probably usually will, just trying to get things worked out here. This is our first week actually previewing the matches. But we will be back next Thursday at the same time. We're going to have a recap of the 2 matches that French teams will be involved in next midweek. That's Monaco's match against Villarreal and Saint-Étienne's match against Beitar Jerusalem. My thanks again to Nathan. You can follow him on Twitter at NathanJStaples, and to Adam, you can find him at FRFootball, FUTBOL Adam. And for all the latest from around France, please follow us at GFFN and visit our website at getfootballnewsfrance.com. Thanks again, and look for our preview show also on Monday with Nathan, myself, and Philip. Or sorry, our regular GFFN show on Mondays at 8 p.m. UK time. Visit us at getfootballnewsfrance.com. Thank you, and have a pleasant rest of your day.